Come on. All right. Okay. All right. So we're finally live. We're live. I want to welcome our Facebook viewers and folks on YouTube TV. Thank you for tuning in. Please share your links and let folks get in on this conversation. If you have questions, please submit your questions via the comment box, and then we'll try to get those questions to the panelists as best we can. But as first, I want to welcome you to Moving People to Action, the People Rising. Tonight, we will take a look at policing and really what that looks like in terms of now, and mostly the time spent in terms of our future. What's our way forward? I want to welcome my co-facilitator host, Michael J. Fox. Michael Scott, the legendary news anchor man, and so Michael, say hi to the people. I know we're going to put your bio up so folks can see who you are and your past and your credentials and things like that. But
oh, be careful of my past. Don't put my past up there. You know what? You have been calling me Michael J. Fox since the mid '80s when I first met you. Oh my God.
I'm sorry about that. So Michael Scott.
No, and then I wondered, is this kid special ed?
Well, Michael, you've been at this. I'm honored to have you with us this evening, especially for this subject, and really not only for the subject, but your expertise and really being an anchor person for many years. I don't want to put no date on you, but you've been in the business for over 30 years in terms of 30 plus.
Since 1977.
Wow. And so
Tony's over there going, I think I had a rattle in my head then.
Yeah, I wasn't born, sir.
You weren't born in 77? See, that's oh my Lord.
I was barely born. I was born in 65. So.
Oh, man.
But hey, you're looking good. You're looking good, man. You're looking good. But as we get into this is a very, very serious subject matter in terms of policing. And so, Michael, I know you did some research and looked at really what's happening, but once you kind of set the tone for the conversation this evening, as we get ready to engage our panelists, Tony and Ricky, in terms of the first segment.
Okay. Well, as all of us know here, days of protests across the United States in the wake of George Floyd's death in the custody of Minneapolis police brought new attentions to questions about police officers' attitudes toward Black Americans, protesters, and others. Now, as Tim mentioned, I did do a little research. Actually, the Pew Research Center had some interesting work, and I had passed it on to Tim to share with any of you folks out there. One thing that really stood out, the majorities of both Black and white Americans say Black people are treated less fairly than whites in dealing with the police and by the criminal justice system as a whole. That first week in June here in Omaha, people took to the streets. I think one of the most surprising things about it was seeing that at least 70% of the people on the streets were not people of color, and they were young people who were taking to the streets. I know I didn't join them because I have a medical condition, and I did not want to go into a group of people not knowing what was going on. That was a tough weekend for Omaha. We made national news because, as you all know, the following night, Saturday, a young man was killed, not by the police, but by someone supposedly protecting his business. I want to let you folks know, and I've shared this with you before, Tony, as a guest on my radio show. I respect the blue. My sister is a former decorated New York City police officer who married in to a family of cops. The wedding was hilarious. I was sitting there with my cousin going, Who do you think's got a gun?
All of them probably.
Seriously, they were corrections officers. They were with the county. They were with the city, and they were with Long Island Police Department. So respect the blue. In fact, when I was 18, my plan was to take the test and join the department. Now, keep in mind, this was 1972. And my father, who was going through a militant streak about then, said, no, a pig is a pig is a pig is a pig. And I went, okay. What was funny is a few years later when my kid sister called me and said, I'm joining the academy. And I said, did you tell Daddy? And she goes, yeah, he was happy about it. I was going, man, the old man has mellowed out completely. And he was so proud of her. And we were. I mean, I went out there for her graduation. And the very next day, I went cruising Times Square looking for her because I knew she was going to be on the beat. And it was funny watching her in action. My baby sister. So yes, I respect the blue, even though I've had a run into my own, many of you know, with the blue maybe 7, 8 years ago. But they're needed. But I think the one thing we're finding out is there may need to be more training involved. You know, I was on another one of these with Tim on Saturday, and somebody who lives down in, Kentucky, Breonna Taylor. This guy was like really on board saying, well, you know, the police, you know, they knew what they were getting into when they walked in there. And I said, oh, they said they didn't know whether it was black or white. And I said, yeah, they did. They knew it was a black person because they were going with that information that they had. My only concern with that, and I should let you know, gentlemen of the blue and ladies of the blue, when I lived in Texas, I did a multi-week course on gun training. And if I walk into a room and someone fires a gun, I return to the sound or the flare of the gun. I don't fire at the person in the bed, because the one thing to remember about Brianna, her boyfriend never got hit. His girlfriend got hit. She got hit, what, 7 times? And that's a training problem when you just fire really willy-nilly into a room.
Do you mind if I just correct one thing that I think is important if we're going to talk about that case, to talk about some of the truths about the case? First of all, she wasn't in the bed, so that's a myth. She
was outside the bed, yes.
In the public. No, she was in the hallway, and right next to her boyfriend that fired. So I think it's important that we talk about some of the truth that's came out since some of the facts that came out about that case. Not that I'm trying to defend anybody's action. I'm just trying to make sure that we just tell a full story, because she wasn't just laying in bed and innocently sleeping and the cops came in and shot her in the bed. That's just not true.
Okay. Is everything else correct?
I mean, that's important, Tony. I think in terms of just, and as you know, Michael, with your many years in the news, that so often we see it from afar. We see just, from the TV, but I think it's important that we stop, especially in light of what's happening in this country in terms of the mistruths and all this information, that we really get back to what's facts versus opinions and all that craziness. And so I think when we have an opportunity to do that, I think we need to do that. What is the facts?
Yeah, and I'll say, I mean, just
so Michael, what are you thinking? Are we ready to jump in?
No, I think we're in right now. Go for it. I mean, what did you want us? You want me to take him in another direction? I like the direction he's going in right now. Were you finishing a thought, Tony?
I just wanted to just say, kind of going back to what you said about your father's comments when you wanted to join the police academy. I've had the same thing.
Michael, I'm having some problems hearing you for some reason.
Okay, well, because Tony's talking, not me right now.
Yeah.
You just interrupted Tony.
Yeah, you're having. Can you hear him, Tony?
I can hear him just fine. Yeah. Can you hear me, Tim?
So it could be. Yeah.
And I hear Tony, and I hear Tim.
Okay. Well, hey, I mean, in terms of just Michael, what you just laid out, Tony. Won't we start with you in terms of just as we look at what Michael talked about in terms of just this whole thing of the Prue report and that whole thing of confidence. And so let's talk there in terms of just how do we increase the confidence and trust of the police department, especially in the Black community? What if we start? Let's start there in terms of just this whole thing of confidence and trust. Of just what's our way forward in increasing that trust and confidence in the police department, especially in the Black community?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that one of the things our department has prided themselves in our current police chief is hiring a diverse police force, and I think that that's one of the things that we can do starting off right away is making sure that our police force represents the communities that we serve all across the entire country. Every city should strive for that. Another thing, I had the opportunity to speak to a group of it was a neighborhood association out in Western Omaha, and this young man was there, and probably not young, probably about my age, but we had a pretty long conversation about he had some negative contacts with the police, and we were able to have a pretty good discussion about that. One of the things I always try to explain to people is, as a police officer, when I'm at work, like obviously Tim, you know me, and Mike's been around me a little bit. Don't know me very well, but been around me a little bit. I hope people that know me know that I'm always laughing, joking. I'm a pretty friendly, funny guy. But when I'm at work as a police officer, and I'm responding to a radio call, which there's so much unknown that police officers respond to, and the same thing with making a traffic stop. There's so much unknown. Your mindset is surviving that encounter. I mean, your mindset is a different mindset. I'm not as jokey and laughing at work until the situation is secure and I can now let my hair down a little bit, even with people in the public. So there has to be an understanding that when you have the opportunities as a community to come to the community service events that our department does, and I think our department, I know our department is head and shoulders above other departments in this country when it comes to that. We should be an example. We are an example to the rest of the country, and the rest of the country should look at what we do in Omaha. But anyway, come to those events. I think the community has to be intentional about coming to those events. Community leaders have to be intentional about inviting people to those events. Nonprofit organizations that have members in their organization, people that work with them, people that they're serving, invite those people to these events to know the police officers. I think the more you get to know us and get to know who we are as people, you'll first off recognize that we're humans. Just because I have a badge on doesn't mean that I'm less than human. I'm just as human as everyone else. I'm someone's dad. I'm someone's uncle. I'm someone's brother, just like anyone else. So I think that's important that the community get to know us and take those opportunities.
Tony, you were going to say something earlier about a comment I said that my dad made about in the 70s about a pig is a pig is a pig. Go ahead, expand on that.
Yeah, you're exactly. So what I was going to expand on that was I had a family member try to talk me out of becoming a police officer years ago when I first told him I was applying for the police department. I mean, it was a pretty heated discussion about why would I even consider this career? And I'm not perfect. I would never say I was ever perfect, even as a 20-year veteran now, with 18 years on the street. My entire career was on the street and patrol. But what I can look back on and know that I think I've made an impact, and I've had members of the community speak to me about either times I've stopped them or had contact with them. And I think even your former co-host mentioned me going to her house with her one of her children that were out of control or something along those lines, where she actually was appreciative of my service. So I think that 20 years later, I'm the first Black president of POA. I'm a police sergeant. There's a lot of things that would not have happened if I had listened to him, So
Tony, the thing that I remember when Tommy Warren became police chief,
mm-hmm.
and I wasn't here, but I came back and I was going, "Ooh, we got a Black police chief.
Mm-hmm.
Things are going to change." But I noticed that when I see these news conferences across the country right now in places that are hot spots, and a lot of the police officials are either females or people of color. And I'm going, sometimes it's not black or brown or white, it's blue and black when it comes to community. I mean, first of all, I guess we need to establish, do you, John, Ricky, are you on board now? Can you hear us? Do you guys perceive some kind of problem of communicating with the communities of color? Go for it, Ricky.
Well, I'm not a police officer, so I don't know.
You got to give it from the perspective of a community.
But as a liaison for the community and an advocate, I like being able to be that mediator. Whenever I approach somebody who was going through trauma, crisis, just had to deal with the police or don't necessarily police, I explain to them who I am and how we can kind of mediate and at least get some language going and some communication going in between both entities. And so, of course, in our community, it's the no snitch. I'm not talking to no cop. I'm not telling nothing. And so me being able to say, okay, so here's the thing. I'm not a police officer, but I do want to know what's happening. And I do want to tell you that as a family, if you're going through something, let's not just jump off and not think clearly and go and retaliate, for example. Give me whatever you want to give to me, and then I can try to work it on my end and share the information so that way it can get worked on the blue guy side. And again, we all want to come to a solution and keep peace in the community. But again, if you don't have that trust there with those officers, who can you kind of put in between to be a buffer? And I've had people approach me and say, I do not want a police car in front of my house, and so it's an easy, hey, officers, could you send a plainclothes gentleman to this residents? We'll get the info and we'll move forward. So it's just about being able to communicate and make sure the community feels comfortable working both of those lines.
But Ricky, go ahead, Michael.
Well, I was going to say to Tony, when I started in news in '77, and I was the police reporter, and Officer Mike Walsh said, come in and have lunch with me. And he showed me all the pictures he runs across accidents and stuff. He said, yeah, I got to make sure you're prepared. But the one thing he told me was the worst call that guys in blue get are domestic violence calls. Am I lying?
Well, it's I wouldn't say it's the worst call. Honestly, I think anytime there's a juvenile or child that's a victim is probably the worst call. But domestic violence calls, there's so much unknown. And remember, we're going to someone else's home. You don't know if they hit a weapon, and obviously their emotions are high when you talk about. And I always think about as men, and there's all men on this call. We have a lot of pride in our homes, and our home is our castle. And you got another man walking in your castle, telling you what to do or trying to give you directions is always a challenge. So how you approach that is very important, and that goes back to what we talked about earlier is that training piece to understand that, when you walk in someone's home, you walk into that man's castles. When I walk in the man's castle in people's homes, I try to make sure I approach as respectful as possible. But there are still times that you got to give very clear, distinct orders to someone in their home. And it's very, very tough at times. It's probably one of the toughest calls in the sense of just the unknown.
Yeah,
I'm smiling because you used that term a couple of times. You're walking into another man's castle, and I'm going, he took the training.
No,
that's a lot of training, isn't it? Yeah,
it's real, and it's I could tell you a quick story if you give me a second here.
Go ahead.
Me and my partner, Todd, I rode with for 9 years. My best friend on the job, actually my best friend in life. But me and my partner, we got a domestic call once where this guy, he was gonna be arrested. He had hit his girlfriend, or wife, whatever the relationship was, and there was two or three small kids in the house. We didn't want to put him in handcuffs in front of his kids. We tried to talk him into another bedroom. He ends up running out of the door and up being a foot pursuit around the block, and we end up having to tase him. And in hindsight, we even talked and debriefed after that call, and that's something that most good officers will take a few seconds after a hot call and have that discussion. And the very next semester, a week later, we handcuffed the man in front of his kids. And I look back, and it's because of our experience a week before. I still felt horrible putting that man in handcuffs in front of his kids, but I'd rather not chase you. I'd rather not have to tase you because you're resisting and running. But it's one of those tough situations where what do you do? And once again, you're in a man's castle. What do you do? And that's always a challenge too when there's kids present.
And so I want to stay with this whole thing of how do we rebuilding confidence, trust. And so Ricky, from your perspective, especially around 360 and that the work. I mean, what is our way forward? How do we get, when you think about Black Lives Matter, what we see so much in terms of police brutality, what we're seeing out there, George Floyd and all these things happening, we cannot sit here and think that we have eroded in terms of trust. And so I think if we really recognize and own that, just like a good relationship, a good marriage, when you break trust, you got to figure a way, how do you rebuild it? So what is your thoughts of rebuilding? Because tonight is about solutions and our way forward.
So to kind of address that is, when you talk about trust, it takes a long time to establish that. The Empowerment Network has been around for 12, 14 years, and they've been working on establishing that trust, not just with the officers, but with the community, and with the community feeling safe and being able to access the 360 and Empowerment Network just as a voice and as an advocate. So maybe a year ago, there were some issues where it was Omaha days. People didn't like how the engagement was going with officers. They came to the 360 meeting, even though they hadn't been there in years, but they knew that this is a rallying point where we can come meet with officers and have our voices heard, try to get to some mediation, and then not just let the ball drop there. We can come back on another Wednesday. We can meet in smaller groups. We can continue to convene. And so the community just knowing that, okay, there is a place that we can go that can facilitate the conversation. And these are the people that we trust in being able to have this conversation. And it's a safe place and safe space where anybody can come and speak and say, this happened to my family, or this is my experience, and I'm not happy about it. And how can we address it? How can we change it? Tim, you talked about the Black Lives Matter and the protests that had gone on throughout the entire city. The first night I wasn't there on Dodge, but every night after that I was there. And I wore my Omaha 360, my volunteer shirt, and I stood and I talked with community members. Being in the community for over 20 plus years, a lot of them recognized the work that I did. And then as I talk with them, I would turn and talk with the officers as well and say, okay, guys, you're doing a good job. We appreciate you. But right now I'm gonna stand right here with my back to the officers, facing the crowd to keep them back so it doesn't get out of hand where, okay, you're forcing these officers to have to detain you, to put you in handcuffs or whatever the case may be. And the officers appreciated that. And then other officers that knew me from the 360 work were like, hey, Ricky, come over here. And so we're talking and engaging, and the crowd is seeing that, oh, they're talking to this guy and he first engaged with us. So we must be able to still have that same, those lanes of communication open. So if they'll talk to him, they'll talk to us. As long as we're not rowdy and pushing and trying to interrogate these officers into doing something, then those communication lines happen where there was protests going on, literally.
Omaha 360 is a really good route to go. And Ricky, I think I know you because of that. And you can say what you want to say in that meeting, because I don't know if you remember the time, Ricky, that I pissed off the chief and he stormed out. And I chased after him saying, hey, I wasn't wrong, was I? He goes, yeah, but you're too negative, Michael. I mean, that's my job.
And maybe why don't you explain, Ricky, what, for folks that don't know 360, I mean, what do you guys try to do? What's the mission purpose of that?
So Omaha 360 was initially birthed to be a prevention and intervention auxiliary of the Empowerment Network. So we wanted to address specifically homicides and gun violence in our city. And so that started out with providing gang members with employment opportunities, one-to-one outreach with community advocates and leaders and village champions and the police departments, working directly with those police chiefs and lieutenants and saying, hey, we want to develop these open lines of communication, but we want you to come here first and just share with the community what's going on and how the policing works, what it looks like when you're in, what are the standard operating procedures. And so once people understand that, yes, we can talk to our officers. No, we don't have to be angry all the time, but when we are angry, we can still come here and have a civil civil conversation and then work towards a solution. And so that's kind of what 360 has been about, is being that buffer, but then also working towards solutions. How do we get these guns off the street? If the gang unit calls and says, hey, Ricky, can you come down to 24th? Sure, we're down there. And it's easier when we can police our own community versus other officers who aren't used to being in that kind of environment coming down and policing that area. And so again, the training is great, it's perfect, but when you can see a familiar face that you know that's from your neighborhood, from your community, help your kid get into college, was that your son's court date, and says, hey, you guys, it's time to go because nothing good is going to happen, then they'll listen and hey, come to the Wednesday meeting if you feel like you were harassed or you got a ticket. Let's discuss it. Let's talk about it. Let's see why things went the way they did. And how many times were you asked to please get on the sidewalk? How many times were you asked, to please do this? So what did it look like? Or was it very, very aggressive on your end, on the officer's end? So it's a two-way coin, and we always got to look at things from both perspectives in order to get to a solution. So the officers aren't always right. The community, we're not always right, but we can work together to get to that solution.
Can I jump in real quick?
No, you're a cop. I don't want to talk to you. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to what Ricky described earlier about kind of being that community leader or that community member that sometimes step in when an officer is doing their job in the community and stepping up and speaking to the officers. That's exactly what we need in our community, and that's what Ricky is doing is perfect. And also, I'll say that Tim's question about how do we rebuild that trust. Ricky's exactly right with his answer of that 12 years. You have to keep making those trust deposits over time. And then when these events happen, remember, and I always like to remind people, Minneapolis is not Omaha, but it happened 400 miles away from here. But our job is so unique in a sense of one incident happened 400 miles away from here. Police officers in Omaha are still feeling the repercussions of it. But because we've had those decades of putting that community trust in there, making sure we're having that relationship with the community, we're going to lose a little bit. There's no question, but it's still that trust. The majority of the trust is still there, and the support in the city is still there. I'm pretty confident with what I've heard from officers on the street that there are still a lot of people in every corner of this city, North Omaha, South Omaha, and West Omaha, and Midtown, that have a lot of respect for our officers, and they speak to them every day, wave. Officers have told me since all the unrest and everything that's been going on, they almost get tired of raising their hand and waving at people because people are really saying, like, we support you. But Ricky's exactly right. There's going to be incidents. There's going to be times where the community has an opinion, or someone in the community has an opinion how an incident turned out. One thing that's great is every Omaha police officer has a body camera. They're on. They have to be on per policy. If they're not, you're disciplined for that. If there's a question, we have it. It'll be recorded. We can review the tape. Let's go back and let's look at it. The chief has been very, very open about making sure community leaders see the videos when there is those questions of incidents. So Ricky's exactly right, and I appreciated that on the street, because there was times you have people who no matter what you say to them, they're not going to listen to the police. They don't trust the police, no matter what you say to them. And I've had community leaders step up and say, "Hey, officer, let me talk to him for you. Let me talk to him. I'll get him out of here." And that helps us. Because ultimately, if I don't have to wrestle around anybody, that's a good day.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it is a tough wire to walk there, Ricky. I'm not envious of it. Before I got into television in Harlem, New York, I worked with emotionally handicapped kids in high school who were as big as I was at the time. Mm-hmm. And having to take away a gun from a kid because you knew the cops were coming for him, and being able to get that kid to trust you and say, "Give me the gun. I will walk with you out of the building and I'll give it back to you, but you got to take it home." And then, of course, getting all kinds of grief when I got back to the principal's office about it. You gave him the gun back and security is salivating for the kid. So, yeah, it's a tough job and I give you big credit for that. Hey, I know that there's some people that we have here as attendees.
And there's some questions, yeah.
That they may have some questions here. Did Robert Wagner join up?
Yeah, no, he's going to be coming on a later segment.
Okay.
But you're right, Michael. There are some questions in the Q&A. I don't know if you see them, but I can at least start off by asking one. These are questions coming from our participants. How do we handle or deal with other officers that are racist that are in the department? So racist, how do you deal with racist officers in your department?
Because, Tony, we hear the line all the time, there are bad cops and there are good cops. So what do we do when we encounter as the citizenry a bad cop, and then when you folks are made aware that we've got a bad cop? What are the procedures?
Well, ultimately, everything boils down to your hiring practices, and that's something that should be more universal across the entire country. We should have make sure everyone's doing polygraphs or doing background checks, that they're actually talking to neighbors, talking to their past coworkers, and everything else before you hire somebody. That's step one, to make sure before they even get here that that's vetted out very, very well. One thing that will happen on police departments when people talk about the bad apples are brought forward and they're brought to the internal affairs. And the thing is, it's only the situations that become national news. I know you guys will both work in the media, so you guys get this. If it bleeds, it leads. If it's a situation where it's a high profile incident, here you go. All of a sudden, everyone's paying attention to that case. But there's a lot of times officers are fired because they've done something, violated policy. And there's officers that are witnesses to that, and they're going to go internal affairs and tell the absolute truth when they see their officers that have done something wrong. And we have a duty to intervene in our policy. There's no question if an officer is going too far with use of force, the other officers have to step up and say something to stop those things. So there is accountability when it comes to that too. So when we say there's bad apples, I've never really liked that term, because if someone has went too far when they're wearing a badge and they're doing something wrong, they're held accountable. They're fired. We've had officers fired, but they don't make the news unless it's a high profile incident. That's just a reality, and the unfortunate reality.
Hey, I'm getting the feel from you that you would be on board for a national police database, which is something that many people are talking about. Reform in the department is something that's needed.
Let me tell you what I support on the national level. There should be a national, every time there's an officer involved shooting, there should be documentation that goes to every police department should have to follow that, in my opinion. We should have that data. I believe the data is important. Everyone should have access to that data. So whenever there's an officer involved shooting, the race of the suspect, race of the officer, all that stuff should be documented and sent to the FBI and should be kept. A national registry of police officers, yes, there should be something along those lines. Right now in the legislature in Nebraska and Lincoln, we're looking at trying to make sure there's something like that here in a state where we don't necessarily have that right now in, say, in Nebraska, but there should be. If an officer leaves, for example, Omaha Police Department that's fired, one of those cases that don't make high profile news, it's not in the news at all, but he did something wrong, he shouldn't be able to go right down the street to Lincoln or to Douglas County Sheriff's Office and get hired. There should be a national registry to make sure those officers are not rehired in other places. So I do support that.
Sounds fabulous.
So you look at that as part of that could be a solution, creating this national database where we can make sure we track those folks, those officers that try to jump from city to city, state to state, and with those bad habits.
And I tag that too, because the initial question was about racist officers, and so as a citizen, if you don't file a formal complaint, you leave them with nothing. You're crying and you're
So what you're speaking to, Ricky, so that's the action part of really what can the citizens do, and it starts with when I'm hearing you say it starts with you got to file a report. At
the very least, if you want to get your word heard, or you want to continue to build a case and give the officers and Tony the necessary things he needs to do to investigate an officer, you got to have at least that background, a little bit, something to go off of.
Yeah, especially if you have a reoccurring situation that, maybe on your corner, you got these same kids hanging out all the time. You call the cop shows up. Don't go screaming at this cop, because first of all, this is probably the first time this cop has heard from you. He doesn't know your background on it. What you need to say is, I contacted the mayor's hotline 3 times. I left a message with so-and-so. You have to be able to give them something to let them know we both want to get this thing resolved here. Am I correct, Tony?
Let me add another piece of what Ricky said, and this is one thing our chief has prided himself on, and I've been impressed with. Omaha 360 is probably the premier place in Omaha, and I hate to say premier because I'm sure there's a lot of great organizations in North Omaha, but that's the place for sure where the police are available every week, no question. If a citizen brings a complaint forward that didn't make it to internal affairs, the chief will start an internal investigation on that complaint. So if there's a citizen that says, hey, I felt this officer was out of line, they can go to Ricky Smith, and Ricky Smith has direct contact to our chief, and he can call him on speed dial. I spoke to the NAACP president recently, who says, yes, I got the chief on speed dial, and that's exactly the way it should be. So if there is those questions and concerns, yes, take them to, if you feel uncomfortable coming to the police, feel uncomfortable coming to internal affairs. And for example, I'm sure you guys are aware, we just tentatively agreed to a contract. And one of the contract changes we made was making it easier for citizens to file complaints. And that was something that I heard from the several community leaders that I've met with. And we addressed that in our contract, because one of the things that I've always been disappointed or probably upset when I hear the terms or comments that the police association hides and protects bad apples is the furthest thing from the truth. So that's one thing that I heard from the community was citizens sometimes feels intimidated having to sign in front of the internal affairs sergeant. So we made it easier, and that was my response from listening to those community leaders.
Hey, Tim, you want me to read this one from the bricks?
Yeah, that's a long one.
Okay. We did get an email from the Bricks Old Market, and they were raising some statistics. Almost every time we see an incident of police murdering, brutality, abuse of powers, violations of persons' rights, almost every single time it's white male cops. And you know what? That person goes on to talk more about it. It's Raheem Sanders, and I disagree with you, Ryan. At least here in Omaha, maybe that may be true, but one of the cops in the George Floyd, weren't they a person of color? One of the cops?
Okay. Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Also, there's another one off the top of my head right here in our backyard, Fair Heels. Those were two black cops, right? And two white female cops.
Well, one of the females is black, and then the other female was white.
Okay.
So they're all minorities. So one thing I'll say about that, and this is, I have a lot of respect for our local media. I think our local media do a lot better than the national media. And that's only because I'm on this Zoom with Michael Scott, so I want to be nice to the local media. But the honest to God truth is, when you look at the average has been about 1,000 people are shot and killed by the police every year. When you look at those numbers and you dig into those numbers, what you realize, there's a lot of cases where there's you never hear about, because it's not that cross-racial incident that's going to stir up emotions and get people to turn the news on and buy papers. I know that's uncomfortable for people to hear, but I believe that's the honest to God truth when you have these cases. So people will remember those cases. Right now, I bet most of us couldn't think of one white person that was killed by the police in 2020. Couldn't think of one. Couldn't name one. Certainly couldn't name their name, because the media is not going to cover it and not going to talk about it.
You know, Tony, to piggyback on what you were talking about, journalists, I want you to know that when a story is breaking, especially when it's some kind of heinous crime, I used to have a black female co-anchor in Dallas, and we would turn to each other and go, please don't let the bad guy be black. Please don't let the black guy be black.
Yeah.
Oh, so, I mean, yeah, we're conscious of it also, you know, when the thing of race comes up.
We guys, we're going to have to wrap up this segment, but there's a few questions that I want to try to get to. I think you answered one in terms of this database. One of the questions in terms of just a police, they get fired, they hop to another county, and so we don't have a way of detecting that they messed up in one place and they start over in another place. But the other question was, how do officers feel about being joined by mental health experts or social workers specializing in domestic violence? Do they think these professionals could be dispatched without a police backup? I guess that would be for you, Tony.
Well, I see Ricky shaking his head. But
so Ricky, you may maybe have something to say too, but let's go ahead. We're going to do a little speed. I want to try to get through these questions before we go to the next panelist.
Okay, I'll jump in really quick and I'll answer really quick. One of the things about co-responders we have to be very careful with. First of all, I think we should, before we start talking about dispatching someone without the police, we have to talk about the unknown on these calls. And that's one thing I talk about, our job being the most dangerous job in the country is because of the unknown. When the 911 call comes in and it's Tony Connor's turn, it's my turn to go. It doesn't matter whose house it is, doesn't matter what address it is, I got to go. And when I get to that house, I have no idea what's behind that door. So just because a call comes out as a domestic, or the call comes out as a person with mental illness, is a person armed that's with mental illness? Is that person suicidal? Does that person that's suicidal turn homicidal? We have to be very careful with just dispatching people without police officers there. Also, I think we also got to be very careful with having an additional citizen on that call with a police officer, because now that police officer's attention is going to be even more divided now, trying to protect that citizen. There's a lot of concerns with those things.
Yeah.
Now I'll say this: now when it comes to mental health in this city and the state and across the nation, there has to be more funding for mental health facilities. There has to be some way to truly make sure people are getting their medicine. We get calls all the time, and the reality, like anything else, 99% of the time, the person has mental illness or suicidal. They cooperate, you pat them down, you search them, they're not a big deal. They just want to get help. But we have to have the facilities to help them too. That's
so. Are you saying that's more resources that? So right now, the Omaha Police Department is not equipped to handle those type of situations.
No, what I'm saying is,
I mean, that's pretty heavy, but
no. What I'm saying is, when we get the call for the person that's suicidal, and we call the Lasting Hope Center, and they say we're out of beds, take them to the most closest hospital. They go to the hospital. Those emergency room doctors say, yes, I've seen this guy here every week. We've given him medicine. We told him what to do. And then they're released out the front door. A lot of times, right when you just showed up to EPCM, emergency protective custody, someone with a mental illness. So I think we have to be very cognizant of the idea that we need the space and a place to actually treat people. And we need more mental health for those things. So police officers have a place to actually take those people if they're actually getting treatment and getting help. An emergency room is not the solution.
No, we're gonna deal later on with this whole thing of, should we be going down that role of defunding the police department? And we're gonna save that for the other panelists. But we're gonna deal also later on with some this whole thing of accountability. But you guys really focus on this whole thing. How do we rebuild trust, confidence? And so as we wrap up this segment, Ricky and Tony, what resonate with you most about? I mean, you see it, you can feel it. We know there's a cultural thing in terms of what's happening, and I know, Tony, you cited some statistics that would say that really Black folks are not being killed as much as we think by police officers. That's numbers, that's fact, right?
Yeah, true.
But when you have a system, when you go back so many years, and I don't want to go all the way back, but in terms of just where we're at right now, there's trust is low, confidence is low. And Michael, you raised your hand.
Let me jump in here, because you mentioned some facts, and Tony, you may find this very interesting. You probably know this. This is from the policefoundation.org, and they were dealing with race and the police. And it says, in the debate over the defund the police movement, both Democrats and Republicans have pointed to attitudes in Black communities about policing to support their opposition to the idea. However, when it comes to policing and crime, Black attitudes elude simple explanations. In polling, Black people often express disgust at police racism, yet support more funding for police. A poll found that despite being the racial group with the most unfavorable view of the police, most Black people still supported hiring more police officers. Okay, and we're talking about since George Floyd's killing, they found that 50% of Black respondents still said that we need more cops on the street, even as 49% of Black respondents said when they personally see a Black officer, it makes them feel less secure. And they're saying it's also an older American thing, an older Black American thing. And I guess that's me, because I like the idea of cops on the street. And the thing I've told you before, Tim, the cops we don't want warriors. We want guardians. And that's something that the academy and the department needs to remember, okay? You got a lot of these yahoos on the different department that look like they're auditioning for the SWAT movie, okay? And we don't need that turn out for firepower to pick up somebody at his apartment for a misdemeanor. Does that sound familiar to you, Tim?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Anybody want to play with that? Ricky?
I mean, one thing is language. And so, Tony has used some really good language in saying the unknown. And so as a citizen who is seeing an officer respond to a situation, there's some unknowns that we don't know as citizens, and we're just reacting with our cell phones out and we're recording. So an officer is responding to a situation where this person is armed, has an arrest record of this, is known as a dangerous felon, and all we see is an officer responding aggressively because he knows this man is armed. He's hurt officers, he's hurt people before, and all we see is he's beating up this black man, and we don't know what's going on. Those are those unknowns that we don't have the earpiece in our ear. We don't know what that radio call looks like. And so it's absolutely okay for us to record and see what's going on. But later on, you got to come back to the officers and say, hey, this situation was way out of hand. It was too rough. It was whatever the case may be. And then that's when you get the explanation of the officers were responding to an armed robbery, a shooting that happened 2 blocks away, and the regular citizens, we just don't know. I'm eating ice cream with my son, and I see a police officer pull up on the actual suspect and take him down. And it's not without any additional harm or anything that's outlandish, but we look, it's like, whoa, what happened? We don't know what happened. But 10 minutes ago, this guy was just the shooter in a drive-by. So those unknowns, it's important that we pay attention to the language that's used. And again, in the protest, the peaceful protest, I'm sitting and I'm facing my community, and the officer behind me saying, you know what? When I was 14, I didn't have a dad. This is why I went to the military. This is why I chose this career. This is why I chose to come back here to my community. So the same guy who was 21, 22, and he's yelling at the officer, you not from here, you don't know our story. He just told me the exact same story in my ear. Like, he does understand. He was just you 10, 15 years ago. You would be an excellent officer because you understand what your community wants. But the way that your language is right now, you're trying to incite something and just instead of having a conversation. And so it's okay for me to be the middle person, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the community trusting me to be that. But again, it's that language. You have to listen, and those unknowns that we don't necessarily know, we can always get back and research and find out what those unknowns are.
Hey, you guys, we're gonna have to keep it right there because we got to be respectful of the other panelists. Y'all trying to kill all the time. So, but we do have some questions in the Q&A. I would hope if you guys could at least stay around and at least answer those questions in the Q&A, and so we can satisfy our participants and that's viewing this and want those questions answered. But we need to transition into a little commercial break, and then we're going to be bringing on Terry Sanders and Kenneth Fox for our next segment. That we're going to be dealing with this whole thing. We kind of touched on it a little bit. But if you guys want to stay around, we're going to deal with this accountability. Accountability, how do we move towards accountability? So with that, I want to thank you guys, Tony and Ricky, for the work you do. It is difficult work, but I think we're at a point in this country where if we don't do it ourselves, in terms of as you as a police professional, Tony, and your organization, and as the community, we both have a dual role. It's going to be forced upon us. People are not, I think that's why our theme is the people are rising. People are just fed up with seeing that type of behaviors. And we know there's a small group, but we got to build a system in which we're going to talk about next in terms of just accountability. So I want you guys to stay and weigh in on some of that too, okay, in terms of just this whole thing of accountability, okay? Hey, thank you guys so much. We're going to go to a commercial break. Stay with us. The net is only going to get better. We got the president of the Black Police Association and Terry Sanders. She's the publisher of Omaha Star. They're going to be joining us. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
As a father and as a community activist that grew up in North Omaha, it's clear that our community must step up and protect our future. Since my childhood, I've seen a lack of investment in North Omaha, which has resulted in small businesses being forced to shut down, prison overcrowding, low graduation rates, and poor access to health care. I am Terrell McKinney, and this is why I'm running for state legislature in District 11. All power to the people.
Congratulations to all the activists in Omaha. You have the community's attention, and we recognize your hard work. I'm Candid Villard with the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. We're a nonpartisan political organization that's focused on voting rights for all Americans. We work to make sure voters are informed about the candidates and the issues. You can find more information that you need on the candidates by visiting vote411.org. October 16th is the last day to register to vote online, and October 23rd is the last day to register in person. There are lots of ways to vote safely. You can request a vote by mail ballot until October 23rd, but your ballot must be to the election office by 6 p.m. on November 3rd. If you're worried about it not getting there on time, please use a drop box. You can also mask up and vote in person at the Douglas County Election Office until November 2nd or in person on Election Day, November 3rd. We want to work with you once this election is over to keep the pressure on. Consider joining the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, where everyone is welcomed. To join, please visit lwvgo.org/join. In this election, every vote will count, and your vote can make a difference. Join us in making this democracy work. Vote, educate, and advocate. Thank you.
By now you've heard it's a good idea to wear a face covering in public.
Please do not take it personally.
Your mask protects me, my mask protects you.
But here's the key. Make sure it covers your mouth and nose.
Like this.
It's easy, Douglas County, so please wear a mask.
Tim is going to throw to you pretty soon. They're in the middle of a commercial. That's why he can't talk to us. But he's going to throw to you pretty soon.
All right, we're back live. We're back live, and so if we can ask Terry, I see Kenneth Fox. I don't see Terry. Terry Sanders, is she in the gallery? Can we get
Terry needs to be here because I got to give her a big congratulations.
Like Ken, or what is it? You want to be called Ken or Kenneth? Okay, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Ken.
There you go.
All right, there you go. Ken's fine.
I can hear you now.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody.
Okay.
I see Terry popping up on the screen there. Ah, there she goes.
There she is.
Hey, Terry, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I want to congratulate you, my darling.
Thank you, dear.
For those of you not aware, she has been the interim publisher for the Omaha Star for almost this year?
8 months. Yep.
8 months. Mm-hmm. And I'm on the Mildred D. Brown board, and we decided to make it permanent. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that somebody stepped up to do that, and you've been handling it quite well the last 8 months.
You guys, for
thank you.
Terry, you want to give a little pitch about the importance of the Omaha Star right now?
Give a pitch about what?
the importance of having a Black newspaper like the Omaha Star, especially these days? I know I'm putting
Sure.
you on the spot.
No, no problem. The Omaha Star is the only Black newspaper in the state of Nebraska. It began publishing in July of 1938. So that's about 83 years. Never missed a publication date. So through civil unrest, through pandemic, through changes in publishers and editors, never missed not one. And we're not going to start now. I'm excited. I think that everyone in our community should have a subscription. A subscription is $40 for one whole year. If you're a business person, you ought to at least have a small business connect ad, the Black Police Officers Association. I'll be calling you, Mr. Fox. But it is very important that we support our local community news. We publish the good news. You know, the student that is going to Hampton, you are not going to read that in the World Herald. You're not going to see that on TV, but you will see it in the Omaha Star.
All right.
Family of the Week, all kinds of things like that. That's where we're going with it.
Congrats to you, my dear. Tim,
Thank
did you want someone else to be running down now?
No,
Wasn't that
no,
Tui?
we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll bring him on later. Toomey, one of our sponsors, we'll bring him on. But let's get into this, you guys. First of all, thank you guys for being here. Appreciate that. But let's jump right in. You've been listening and watching in terms of the conversation that we've now. Let's talk about this whole. Let's jump in terms of accountability and do a pickup from the previous panelists. When we look at the work and the steps necessary to hold really each other accountable for policing, because policing, you know, they're getting paid by the taxpayers, right? What does that look like when we seek to inform, challenge, and engage and move people to action? But what should accountability look like? Terry, you want to take a shot at that? What should accountability look like?
I think accountability should look like full knowledge. It should not look like hearsay. It should not look like gossip. It should be full knowledge with facts, fact check. I think many times we don't fact check between each other, and we go and we say things that are not necessarily correct. And then that's where the trouble starts. So fact checking is important. And in fact checking, you're accountable. You agree, Mr. Fox?
Yes, ma'am.
Ken, go ahead.
No, I absolutely agree with it. And I'll say from a police department standpoint, you know, that accountability starts with at the top. It starts with your leadership. And your leadership should have, you know, transparency as one of their number one priorities when it comes to those fact checks and being able to explain things and explain why things were done, and even explain why things were done badly, right? And don't be afraid and be brave enough to explain that, you know, we're humans, we're officers, we make mistakes also. So you know, that culture starts from the top. And, you know, we're lucky at the Omaha Police Department because we have, you know, a leader in leadership that believes in transparency. We all know that if something happens, you know, Chief Schmatter is one of the first to try to step out in front and give information so people are not left in the dark and people can fact check.
I gotta give him credit for that. He does get out in front of these things real quickly, especially what happened back that first weekend in June.
Absolutely.
And I also want to say that it is commendable for our local police department to have a police chief like that, because many cities, they're backing up and they're not supporting their officers. They're not being accountable to the public. And Chief Schmatter is. I have been on panels with him, and he is very upfront. If it's a dog, he calls it a dog. He doesn't call it a cat or a tiger with a collar on. It is a dog, and he admits it. And wrong is wrong and right is right.
Absolutely.
Hey, Ken, I want to take you in a direction here that I kind of touched on with Tony when it comes to police unions. I feel like they're being used as a political football. As I told Tony off the top, my sister's ex-NYPD, okay, from an NYPD family, but they've got a lot of problems with their union in New York. And case in point, last month, the police union out of New York endorsed Donald Trump. The very next week, it was found that the Trump administration, quote, secretly diverted money from the 911 Police Foundation for first responders, took money from them and put it elsewhere. So my whole thing is, you got an administration that loves to use the blue, use the blue while at the same time they're screwing the blue. You know what I'm talking about at all?
Yeah, well, I'm not familiar with that situation, but what I will say is we have a really great, strong union here in Omaha. That's what I can speak to, is what we have here in Omaha. And the OPOA is done a really good job of changing that old type, that union type feel when it comes to community outreach. Tony has been a leader in making sure that he goes to all the three Omaha 360 meetings, being available, being accountable, and being able to be there and answer questions that people in the public have for decisions made or when officers are supported by the union. He's been there and been brave enough to be in those rooms and have those conversations. So that's what I can speak to is, again, we are really lucky here in Omaha with some of the things that we have in place when it comes to the foundation and the structure of our police organizations. We can always be better. Not saying that we're perfect, but we are lucky, and we're a beacon of hope for other organizations and cities to model what we have.
Ken, we got an email that just came in from an Adolph Tompkins, and he wants to know, if you remove quantum immunity, then and only then you can have accountability. You understand what we're talking about?
I do.
Yeah,
I do. That's a hard question, and I can tell you, I know the state of Colorado just passed some law to get rid of or minimize qualified immunity, and just reading some of their law writing, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible, and I'll say that initially when I hear it, you worry because it's change, but some of the things that they did wasn't bad, and it did, put a direction to hold people accountable for their actions. But what they did was, it was more for the bad, the bad actions, right? The bad decision making of officers that should be held accountable. So I believe there's a medium to that, because I know a lot of police officers are doing what they feel the best, and sometimes they make mistakes, and I would hate for them to get caught up in a political kind of back and forth on something like that.
Okay, that works for me. Tim, I can't hear you if you're trying to talk to us. Is anybody else hearing Tim?
No.
No, Tim, we can't hear you.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, Tim, I hear you popping up right now. Hey,
okay.
Robert Wagner on by any chance still?
Yeah, he's going to come on the next segment.
The next segment. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, because it's almost 8:15.
Okay, well, we got to move. We got to hear. We got to move on. There's another question. I'd like to get to some of these questions. One of the things that in the Q&A, this, and it really speaks to it's one of the reasons that black cops, that black people don't like cops, is because they are not held accountable for their actions, and when they are, it's times off. It's a time off with pay, and that's not punishment to most people. So most times they get time off with pay, and they don't. Most people don't see that as punishment. You want to talk to that, Ken?
I can, and I totally understand that. I understand the feel of that. What I always try to explain to people, especially people close to me, is that there is due process, right? There's due process for someone that is caught for a crime. Person could be caught red-handed, but they're offered due process, and it's the same with police officers. There's a process, and if they are, accused or found to be in violation of a policy, they have due process, and that due process is going in front of whether it be a grand jury or whether it be a personnel board, and being able to try to explain the actions made. So I know it does look bad, and people do want rapid action, but they are afforded that due process, and so they are at home, on administrative leave but trust and believe that if there is something grossly negligent that officer has done, the police department and even the officers can't wait to get rid of him and for that justice to be swift. But again, they're afforded that due process, and so we have to wait for that.
Now, what's your thoughts, Terry, in terms of a community review board or a entity, independent auditor that have some degree of oversight? I know we went down that road some years ago in our department, but it just seems, the talk is, how do we create an independent body that works in junction with everything that's happening, that's more accountability?
Well, I think that accountability is important. And you have to have the right people on that review board that approach it with fairness. People get on those boards and they have another axe to grind, and that is not the place to sharpen that axe.
Yep.
So I think it's very important that if that is reestablished, that it is reestablished with a diverse makeup, and that the people are of one accord. We're here for fairness, period. Nothing more,
we're here for
nothing
fairness,
less.
not payback. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Would you want them to have some degree of subpoena power? I mean, in terms of just how do you make sure that they have the authority and the power?
I think when the board is set up, the authority is established. And that is established from the outset and not in the middle. Many times we get in the middle of situations and then you want to start laying cards on the table. Cards should be already out when it gets started. And if they're going to have subpoena powers, then that needs to be done at the outset. Whatever the rules are going to be, list them all out.
Yes, you've got to know what the game plan is before going in.
Sure.
Because You do not want to be similar to an ineffective grand jury, not
Right.
having all the information, not
Right.
being able to call a citizen in to talk to them and ask them, not being able to call a cop in and ask them what happened.
It's all about strategy. And the strategy has to be laid out, as I said before, from the initial meeting. If that is the strategy, then laid out there.
Yeah. But when you have, and that this whole thing about accountability, and Ken, when you have co-workers and police, that whole thing of, that cold blue, but how do you deal with a culture that they see something? For instance, when you think about what happened with George Floyd, you had 3 other officers watching that happen. And so some would say that speaks to culture, that you can sit there, another man has a knee on someone's neck, you can see that this person is just not a threat. I wasn't there to, but it appeared that he was not a threat. But the culture, for some reason, no one out of 3 officers decided to intervene in that situation. There was some verbiage, hey, we heard a little bit after the fact, but most importantly, they did not act to remove that officer that was right there. That's a culture.
Yeah. Well, offender was the training officer. Am I right, Ken?
That's correct.
Yes. So,
Okay.
I mean, here's the guy who's, we're a couple of rookies here, and this is the guy who's supposed to be watching do his thing. And it's like, well, how far do we push here? To go, hey, you need to get up off of him. He can't breathe. His hands are handcuffed. Why are we still kneeling on him? Yeah. And I guess there's that whole, as I think Terry was going down about the culture of blue.
And I'll say this: I've been on for 14 years, and about 13 of those years I've been a use of force instructor, and I was also in the academy as a use of force instructor sergeant. So it was my job to kind of oversee the entire program, and I'm currently in the training academy right now as a lieutenant, as a commander. And I can tell you from my experience, and some would say expert experience, but from my experience, I would say that was a total lack of training, and it was disgusting. It was disgusting to watch. Every police officer that I was around that watched that video, white, black, Latino, was disgusted, and no one gave an excuse for what we saw. First and foremost, and I believe that's probably one of the first times that the entire country was on the same page, that they should be held accountable for what they did. So that, to me, that's a culture for that department, in my opinion, because our culture here in Omaha is we teach, we don't teach to, restrict someone's breathing by placing your knee near their neck. We don't teach that. We absolutely don't teach that. We don't teach holding it there for long periods of time. We don't teach holding someone in that position, being cuffed on the ground, laying flat down for long periods of time. As soon as it's tactically safe to do so, we want you to raise them up or put them on their side so they can continue to breathe correctly. So I think, again, that was one of the first times I think that there was no deviation from that. Was disgusting and appalling.
Well, Ken, I think it was you when we lost Kerry Orozco, and I was standing next to you, and I said something about, man, I guess that's something they're going to have to learn in the academy. And you looked at me as a training officer. I think you were a sergeant then. You said, oh, yes, we're going to be dealing with that, because you guys got to take what you learn on the street and correct it. And I was impressed when you made that statement.
Yeah. One of the things, one of the questions, and maybe both of you guys could weigh in, but it says, how do we trust a system that is built on racism? I mean, this question is is assuming that this is a system that's built on racism.
You know, I want to weigh in on that just a bit. We talk about racism, and we see it in other cities. You see it in George Floyd. You see it in Breonna Taylor. You saw it in the man that was shot in I think it was a Burger King parking lot. You saw it in the man who was jogging and was gunned down. Now, I'm a lifelong Omahan. I have lived in other places, but this is where I was born, this is where I was raised, and this is where I am. Do we see that kind of racism in Omaha? And to bring it, I don't think it's at our doorstep in that proportion. Yes, there are always limited, there are situations, but as a whole, I don't necessarily see that. And the age that I am, I went to segregated schools. When I was in middle school was when busing started. And, you know, we went to a neighborhood school, but we were taken out of the neighborhood schools and taken elsewhere by our parents. I have raised children who have not gone to predominantly African-American schools, but I think that racism culture is learned at home. Okay? That's something that you are not necessarily born a racist. That's a learned behavior.
Absolutely.
And
Yes, it
the
is.
quicker it is nipped in the bud, if you see it, you say something. And so we don't have the racism that other cities have, not in Omaha, Nebraska. Yes, there are limited situations, but it's not a blanket like, ooh, I can't walk down the street, I can't go shopping, I can't do this, I can't do that. We don't have that, and I'm thankful that we don't. I have a Black male child. I understand. I get it. But
what would you say, Ken? And we're gonna need to wrap up. But once you respond to that, Ken, and then we'll wrap up and for our last segment.
Give me another run at that question again, so I can make sure I'm hitting the point.
Well, they
Yeah, what
were
is
just
exactly the question?
the question in the Q&A was just how do we trust a system that is built in terms of the foundation, the cores, is racist?
I agree. I know what you're saying. I tell people this all the time. I remember I was in a master's class at UNO, and I got hit with well, you're a police officer, you're blue. That's where your thinking is from. And I had to tell her, in front of about 20 people that I'm a Black man first, right? I've been a Black man longer than anything I've ever been in my life. And they can take this badge away from me tomorrow, but they can't take away from me being Black. And so that's going to be always where my first, where I come from first, is just to make sure as a Black man, if I'm okay, right? Do my check myself to make sure I'm okay. And I understand that this system was created, right? Wasn't created for people of color. I understand that. I believe the foundation of the system, with the right people and the right change, can be a system that is better for us. But those components have to change, and we have to be okay. We have to be okay as law enforcement. We have to be okay as the criminal justice system to understand that those changes need to be made. And people hate change. They hate it. But we got to make these changes. And I think we're on the right track. And this is the best time for America, as tragic as this a situation that we have to roll out these changes. But this is the best time for us to speak up, make the right changes in voting, right? Make the right changes in judges, make those changes to fix that.
Right. And I think, and really, if I could sum up another question that came in the Q&A, really, what the person is saying is we got to figure out how do we, create an independent investigation. And I think, Terry, you spoke to that, or we talked about this community review board, but it has to be independent. It is hard. I think you can do internal investigation, but I think when you think of something, when you think of being a police officer, how deadly it could be on both sides, you need an outside person looking in. And I think if we don't have nothing to hide, you have body cameras now. And so why not just take that next step to increase the confidence of the people you serve by having an independent body of people that's going to oversee and that's going to have some power, some subpoena power that we can start to rebuild that trust. So hey, let's give you 1 minute each. Way forward when it comes to just the things we've been talking about. What's on your mind that you want to leave the viewers with?
I want to say transparency.
Okay.
I think that's very, very important. Transparency, honesty, and fact checking.
Nice. What about your Ken?
I like to echo that. That transparency is big for me personally, and also just creating dialogue and creating opportunities to discuss the issues. And we have to be open as police officers. We have to be open to listen to it. We have to be open to hearing something that we don't want to hear. We have to be open to understanding that maybe we are, helping or promoting or having the actions of the system. It's just not working, and we have to change it. And so we have to be okay with that. We have to be brave enough to change things, and I'm okay with that. But I also like to say too, and I don't know the specific inner workings of it, but the mayor does have a group, a committee that looks at those complaints. And I'm not sure the subpoena powers they have, but they have the powers to look over some of these cases that have complaints, and then talk to the chief and make recommendations. So we're there. It's not like we're not listening. We're listening. Yeah. The mayor's listening. The chief's listening.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that's a start, but I think we got to go deeper. Okay. In terms of just that review. Is one thing to review something and one's action, but also there's a different when that person has some power to subpoena and to do something about that independently of your internal system. And so, but I think we got to start somewhere. We got to at least commit to go somewhere to make it better. Now, Ken, you guys, part of this too is the police department should reflect its community. So Absolutely. Right now, you guys are recruiting for new officers. Do you want to say something about that real quick?
Absolutely. We are taking applications until the 26th. So put your apps in. If you want to affect change, let's do it from the inside. Let's go. So
what's the starting salary?
I believe 48,000.
That's not bad.
Not bad at all, right? So let's affect change. Join OPD.com. Let's get on there, apply, and get with me too, because we love to do mentoring, especially for people that look like us. We want to mentor you through the process because it can be overwhelming if you haven't experienced it before. We want to be there. The BPOA want to be there to support you. So reach out.
And Tim, if I remember correctly, through your association with Metro, when we had Pete Andrews retiring, he was also making a pitch for more Black firefighters, females, Latins, that they were needed. Did you guys also have a setup with the police department, Tim, with helping them get ready?
Yeah, there's some courses that you can take at Metro that will help prepare you as well. Absolutely.
Because that's the one thing we noticed.
The preparation is key.
Yeah, preparation's key. You got a lot of these kids, white kids, who are joining the force because daddy was on it, uncle was on it. They already got some of the legwork done for them. So our people need some help, and Metro's got some courses to help.
That's absolutely true.
Make that pitch.
Hey, you guys, thank you so much. We most definitely we went over. I mean, Michael, dang, I thought you was going to help keep me on time, but we let the first segment go too long, and now we're chasing ourselves. Okay, so I have to apologize on behalf of
thank
Michael
you for
Scott.
the invitation.
Huh?
Yes.
Wait, would you just
What's
blame
that,
it on me?
Terry? Terry, what you say?
I said thank you for the invitation.
Okay, we'll try
Thank you
harder
for the
next time.
invitation.
Okay, but I appreciate your insight and really you sharing, and hopefully our viewers will be able to. It resonates with our viewers and be able to kind of look at how do we move forward. So thank you guys so much. Feel free to stay on and answer some questions in the Q&A and stay on. But go ahead, Michael.
Terry said something interesting about Omaha. This was her place. This is her life here. I've had the advantage or disadvantage, depending how you look at it. I have lived in 11 metro areas in this country. I've lived in the West, I've lived in the East, I've lived in the Southwest, the South, and the Midwest. So I got a feel for this country probably better than many politicians.
Mm-hmm.
This problem with the police, it's everywhere, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And we actually do not have it as badly as some communities do.
Right.
I think the point you were trying to make, Terry.
Yes.
It's not that bad a situation. Some of us may have had a run-in with police in the last 7 or 8 years and did a mind check, because I remember when I first got married, my wife was Black, and I said to her, check your attitude when we hit the airport, because outside of Omaha, I'm just another N in a suit, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So be careful how you act out there. That's something we have to keep in mind.
Sure.
We have to decide what that community is and how we're going to enter it.
Hey, we got to wrap it up. They're killing my ear, Michael. They're saying wrap this thing up, okay? I got Robert Wagner waiting, and Captain Wayne Hudson. Okay, so and then we're gonna bring. Okay, so hey, thank you guys so much. Appreciate you. Please stay around for the discussion, and let's go ahead and transition into a break. And then when we come back, joining us will be Robert Wagner and Captain Wayne Hudson. And then we have one of our sponsors that is going to come and say hi.
As a father and as a community activist that grew up in North Omaha, it's clear that our community must step up and protect our future. Since my childhood, I've seen a lack of investment in North Omaha, which has resulted in small businesses being forced to shut down, prison overcrowding, low graduation rates, and poor access to health care. I am Terrell McKinney, and this is why I'm running for state legislature in District 11. All power to the people.
Congratulations to all the activists in Omaha. You have the community's attention, and we recognize your hard work. I'm Capt Villard with the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. We're a nonpartisan political organization that's focused on voting rights for all Americans. We work to make sure voters are informed about the candidates and the issues. You can find more information that you need on the candidates by visiting vote411.org. October 16th is the last day to register to vote online, and October 23rd is the last day to register in person. There are lots of ways to vote safely. You can request a vote by mail ballot until October 23rd, but your ballot must be to the election office by 6 p.m. on November 3rd. If you're worried about it not getting there on time, please use a drop box. You can also mask up and vote in person at the Douglas County Election Office until November 2nd or in person on Election Day, November 3rd. We want to work with you once this election is over to keep the pressure on. Consider joining the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, where everyone is welcomed. To join, please visit lwvgo.org/join. In this election, every vote will count, and your vote can make a difference. Join us in making this democracy work. Vote, educate, and advocate. Thank you.
By now you've heard it's a good idea to wear a face covering in public.
Please do not take it personally.
Your mask protects me, my mask protects you.
Here's the key. Make sure it covers your mouth and nose.
Like this.
It's easy, Douglas County, so please wear a mask.
Around for this last segment, we have Captain Wayne Hudson, Captain, my man Toomey's on, and Robert Wagner. I can't see you. I can see your name. Let's see if we can get a fakes action there. But as we're working, as Robert's working on getting his video working, Toomey, I wanted we folks saw your video in terms of. Can you hear me, Toomey? You're on mute. Let me take it off mute. There you go. There you go.
I can hear you.
There you go. I can hear you. So we ran your commercial during the break, and I just want to thank you for being a sponsor of Moving People to Action with your company, GenPro, GenPro Omaha. So just real quick, man, how can people get a hold of you and tell them a little bit about what you guys do? You got 60 seconds.
Okay, I'm gonna take care of that real quick. Hopefully, just 2 days ago, the county actually increased the alert level for COVID-19. I'm not sure, I have kids in school right now, and I'm sure everybody knows that. Nebraska, Omaha in particular, has actually seen a spike in COVID-19, and that's really why I told team, hey, get me on. I got to take care of this because I know what to solve our problems. We got things to solve our problems, and so I am the owner of GenPro of Omaha. We've been around for so long. We have what we call EnviroShield. It's very effective. I've had a lot of customers, even myself today, yesterday, this week. We've been really busy helping a lot of businesses out. Okay, I just don't want to help people that call me out. I want to help people that really matters. Okay, and so with EnviroShield, it's one of the best, category 4. It kills, no residue. The most important thing I want you to get is it really works. It's been proven. I have customer references. If people need it, I would give it out. But we got to stop the spike. I have not heard a lot of deaths in Omaha, but we have to stop it. The reason why I'm so passionate about this and the reason why I really want people to take action is because we're getting into the flu season. With the flu coming in and with COVID, it's really tough to really say, okay, what's the difference? Okay. And so I really want to protect your environment, protect your people, protect your family, and protect everything you have. I've had close people affected and talked about it. And so feel free, I don't want to talk about the product, but feel free to contact us, 402-493-4516. Like I said, it's free consultation. Let's stop the spike and let's all just make sure that our families are safe. Okay. And if you have any questions, feel free to call me, email me, and I'll take care of it.
And let's put that in the Q&A, your contact information and your website. But that's EnviroShield.
EnviroShield, yes.
And that's really a product that helps with disinfecting COVID-19. Hey, thank you so much, Toomey, and I appreciate what you're doing out there to try to help keep that virus from spreading by your cleaning products and services that you guys provide. That's GenPro Omaha. Thank you so much, my man.
Thank you for having me on, guys. Stay safe and stay blessed.
Okay. Hey, so Robert, can you hear me? I can see his name, but I can't hear him. So somebody kind of work with him to kind of get him up. But I want to get started in terms of just respect with time. But Captain, thank you so much, man, for your patience. I appreciate you. And I'm sorry for that little demotion there at the start, man. I owe you one.
Right.
I owe you.
Yeah.
But let's jump into it. You know, when you think about the people are rising, Black Lives Matter, police, community relations, the inequalities, and the effects of institutional racism, the list goes on and on and on, right? How do we use our voices to be more intentional about the change when it comes to increasing the confidence of policing in the Black community? And so really just that whole overall confidence. There's a lot going on. How do we increase the confidence? Captain Wayne, I think you're froze there, buddy, because it was to refresh your screen. Let's Wayne, Captain, can you hear me now? Okay, Robert, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now. Okay, there we go.
There's something going on with our system here or the internet. So if I heard you correctly, you're asking how can people have their voices be heard? Okay. Okay. So what I want to say to that, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be on the program today. Peaceful protest. As we've seen here recently in the Omaha and the metropolitan area, we had a lot of peaceful protests, but then again, we did have some civil unrest. I personally feel the best way for people to make change is through peaceful protesting. Get out in the streets, let their wants, let those be known, then organize, not only just focus on what
Go ahead.
Yeah. And then you want to have it focus on exactly what changes you want to see to what structures. If it's the criminal justice system, don't just stop with law enforcement. Look at the entire criminal justice system and affect change that way.
Okay, Robert, hey, welcome, man, welcome. So really, I mean, you heard the question in terms of just what what's going on. There's a lot of just crap going on right now. Black Lives Matter, police brutality. In one of the Q&A, most people are protesting because of the injustice and police brutality and what they see. How do we regain confidence? What is your take on how do we get to a place where we can start to heal and rebuild confidence?
Well, Tim, man, that's been something I've been thinking about for a while now, even with the Skerlock case. And it's hard when you have the county attorney, discrediting the special prosecutor. And there's so many other things, that we miss. Yeah, we talk about what's going on now, but there's so many other injustices that go right past us. And we don't ever have that group. We don't have that solid core of people to stand by us in order to get that type of change. We talk about it. We have these meetings. 360 is like cheerleaders for the police department, and they never really hold them accountable. It's a friendly environment. Everything is appraised. But with situations like this, you have to hold people accountable, from the mayor to the governor. The chief, he does a good job. Deputy Chief Kanger does a good job. But you have so much other things going on that mud everything up. Yeah. And I feel like for 8 years, we've heard the same thing over and over. We've heard panels. We've had the mayor's review board, and it had no teeth.
It has no teeth. I would agree with that. It has no teeth.
So what are we holding them to? When there is an incident, it's paid vacation. 9 out of 10 times we won't hear about it. It'll be internal. So a lot of times people come to me and they say, Robert, what can we do? And there's times where I don't know. I sometimes feel like giving up to him because it's so muddy,
Mm-hmm. And Captain, Hudson, I mean, what he said, what resonate with you? Because I think people, and I hear you, Robert, when you're saying that, it's just like the accountability to a large degree is missing.
It's missing.
And we're having all these conversations, and I think folks, like for instance, the last panelist, they were saying, well, hey, Omaha's different. Omaha's different. We're doing good. We don't see the racism. We don't see a lot of that. But the folks like Robert Wagner would probably disagree with that. And so where do we meet in the middle? What's that common ground that we can create, Captain, that can help get us to some solutions?
I think, Tim, we have to have those hard conversations. We have to have the community, we have to have law enforcement in the room and have those hard conversations about uses of force, pursuits, or anything that's on the community's mind, anything that's on law enforcement managers' mind. Sit down, have the hard conversations, come to some type of common ground so we can further bridge that gap between.
You froze up there. There you go, you're back.
Yeah, I apologize. There's something going on with our system. But yeah, we have to have those hard conversations though. And everyone should have an opportunity to voice their concerns, with the community to law enforcement and law enforcement to the community.
Now, Robert, for you, what does police reform, what does that look like for you? And what you're hearing in terms of your circle of influence and the people around you, what does police reform look like? And then, Captain, really, if you could kind of talk to that a little bit, what does police reform look like? We keep hearing this. What does it look like for you?
I'm not for defunding the police, for one. I've never been an advocate for that, and I don't see that as a viable solution. Reform to me would look like more transparency, allowing an auditor, allowing somebody to have the power to prosecute officers that are corrupt. And yeah, we don't have a biggest problem as other cities, but we still have problems that come up. And I've said it over and over, nationwide, when we can get the unions to come to the table, because really, Tim, this is what happens. An officer does something, the chief fires him, and the union will support him. They will pay their legal fees, they'll do all that they can to get them back, to get their job back. And that's the type of mistrust that carries over in the community, because this is what we see over and over. And until we say, hey, let's really be serious about this, let's bring in somebody that's going to really enforce and hold them accountable, we'll be having this conversation 8 years from now, Tim.
And that whole thing, accountability, I like stay there in terms of, so Captain Hudson, can you kind of explain a little bit what he's talking about in terms normally? So it's a representative from the union, representative from the city, and then there's a arbitration list of people that they pick from, and both of them agree to, of this person is the third party. I think there's something there that we got to do a deep dive into that list, or something that's happening there that it just seems like we can create a fairer system that weighs a little bit more on the community side. I mean, where's the community?
Well, I'm going to say this here. I'm not a Omaha police officer, as you know.
Yeah.
And the arbitrator system is something that, from my understanding, is in the police, in the union.
Yeah, he's froze up. He froze up again. I think you're back. Go ahead.
Yeah, this thing's having problems, but it's something that's been negotiated between the union and the city. Okay, so with that being said, now since every law enforcement officer, they have a right to their job. So let's say something happens, they can choose to go to an arbitrator, and an arbitrator has a final decision on what happens in that case. Now, it may, I believe, can be appealed to court, but that's something that the city and the union has agreed on, is an arbitrator. It's not an employee of the city. It's not someone selected by the union. It's not someone employed by the union or the city. It's an independent person to hear the case.
And I think maybe, Robert, as we look at actions, maybe that list of arbitrators and folks that independent person, maybe we got to figure out how we vet them, and we look at their track record of how they have ruled in terms of just for a period of time on a lot of these situations. Because just like our judges, we don't really have a good system of holding them accountable for the decisions they make. And I think we got to figure out, everybody got to be on Front Street when it comes to accountability, especially when you're affecting someone's life.
Right.
You know, it's got to be a way that we can get closer to this whole thing of accountability, that it reinsures, it reinforces that we can trust this system. There's too much it's a lot of just distrust in the system.
Oh, I agree, Tim. And like I was saying, until you really say, hey, you get everybody involved, you know, and have that hard conversation, because it needs to be hard. It doesn't need to be in a friendly environment at 360. We have to really say we want change. And I thought Klein did the right thing by getting a special prosecutor, but when I feel he undermined him. You know, I always liked Don Klein. I've worked with him in the past. But yeah, I felt like he undermined the special prosecutor, and that was a serious issue. You know, that was a time where all eyes were on the city, and we had all eyes nationwide. We had a chance to do something and make a statement, and I felt like he took the low road.
And you know, and part of that, you know, when you think about what's the action part of that, Robert, and you guys, it's, you know, he's going to come up for a re-election in 2 years. I think, you know, I think people got to recognize that they truly have the power to make the change. And part of that is, if we felt that he didn't do right by that situation, vote him out.
Right.
Vote him out. Or if they want him out before, start a petition and go do a recall. I mean, what is it called? When you just you recall him?
Recall, yeah.
Get him out of there. But so I just think we got it. Same with policing. No. Here's the thing. You hear this thing, both of you guys. I hear law and order. And Captain Hudson, give me your take, and I would love your take from a community person, Robert. I have an opinion, but I hear this law and order and this whole notion that, you know, you take an oath to serve and protect. That's the oath. But we're hearing more law and order. Where should we be, Captain? Should we be more of a force of serve and protect? Or this, I think when I hear law and order, that's a heavy fist, heavy foot. It's
military.
Captain. He's frozen again. You take it first, Robert. You go ahead and take it, Robert, and he'll come back. I mean, this
law and order is that military approach, and that's not what a community needs. You have a lot of young cops that just get out the academy, and, you know, I'm gonna be honest, some of them come north and, woo, it's chaos sometimes. You know, we've talked about seniority, we've talked about everything, to where a lot of officers, they like to work west. But when you have officers that come north and there's a history of force, so to speak. I myself, I had an incident, and I've never held the police responsible for that night. I was angry that night, and what they did goes back to what Fox was saying. It's a culture. When you can stand by and see somebody that needs air and you don't allow them to get up, why? You know what you're doing when you're restricting somebody's air supply. If you're choking somebody, you know what's going to happen eventually. So yeah, when you have people that stand by and allow that to happen, come on. That's a culture. That's ruling with the military mindset. It's not protecting and serving. It's it's totally the opposite. And until we get to that point, and I'm gonna be honest, it's not going to happen within the next 10 years. But until officers that we know, that we go to school with, that we work with, come in this community, it's going to continue. We're always going to have that mistrust.
Yeah. Your take on it, Captain?
I think it's a combination of both. We have to serve and protect, without a doubt, but we do need, our nation is made up of laws, and certain laws have to be enforced. And I think that's what the community wants us to enforce the laws. Think about it. What would our community be like if we didn't enforce certain laws? So yes, we have to serve and protect, but at the same time, we have to enforce the law.
So in wrapping up, you guys, when you, and Robert, if you could, think about this and go first, and then Captain, we're at a critical point in terms of this country, and what's at question is social racial injustice and police brutality, and just there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of fears out there. If you could sum it up, in 60 seconds, what do you think? Where do we gotta go? I mean, how do we begin? I know we can't solve it, right today, but what would you say we need to be really, really paying attention to if we're gonna get better and do some of the things that you're talking about, Robert? Where do we gotta go?
Oh boy.
You only got 60 seconds. I know. So we can write the other stuff later and get it on so people can hear it. But I think just give us a framework of where we need to go, some bullets.
You would have to bring somebody in. You would have to have an auditor. We've only been saying this for about 8 years now. And until we have that in place, you're still going to feel the distrust. People are going to still think, there's no point in complaining. There's no point in filing a complaint because it's not going to be investigated. So until you get serious about an auditor, whether it's a mayor, a candidate in the future that believes we need one, but somebody has to say, hey, to protect officers and to protect citizens, this is what we want to do. It's worth the investment.
I happen to agree with that. I think the citizens have to win, and because at the end of the day, we're footing the bill, and we need each other. The community needs police officers. The police officers need us. We can help each other. It's like we need each other to survive. So, Captain Hudson, I know you're trying to get back in, man. We got about a minute.
So give me your question again, Tim.
So if you can summarize in 60 seconds, give us some bullets on really how do we get through solutions and what we should be paying attention to as we look to try to solve and get better at this thing in terms of community policing and regain the trust and confidence of the citizens.
We have to have we must build that bridge, continue to build the bridge. And I think over the years here, we've done an excellent job at doing that, okay? We must have more community engagement. Let's put Let's put the community, let's put law enforcement leaders in a room and have those tough conversations. Then let's take that, let's get out into the community and let's see
He froze up again, but as he's trying to reset, and, you know, in terms of just one of the questions about who's going to take the lead to really stimulate those difficult questions. One of the questions. So keep going, Captain.
Yeah, the community got to see us, law enforcement and community leaders working together. As they see that, then they I think we'll have a better relationship with the community that way. But we have to build those bridges. We have to have those spaces in which we all can communicate. And like Robert said, now we have to have those critical conversations. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be, you know, scripted. People got to have the opportunity to talk and say what they want to say.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's needed.
Yeah. Well, and part of those critical conversations, I think we all agree in terms of that. And one of the things that we have to be able to have some pretty pointed conversation, Black men and white police officers. We gotta deal with that. It just seemed like there's some tension there, and some things that we have to talk about and deal with, because you know it just we have to do that. So I appreciate you guys. We're out of time. Go. You got something?
Quick, the other thing too, we gotta for law enforcement.
Robert, is there as he go ahead. Yeah, he's having some challenges. And Captain, you keep freezing up there. But Robert, is there just any quick thoughts why he kind of jumped back in, and then we're going to have to wrap up.
Oh, I appreciate it, Tim. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thanks for all you do, Captain Hudson. And yeah, you know, I'm open to whatever, you know, I'll be the one to sit down at the table. Let me know.
Yeah.
And I have to say that I'm frustrated because my computer worked fine for the last hour and a half. Gets to my segment, then it starts to mess up. But we have to have those critical conversations, though. We have to sit down and we have to get more minorities into law enforcement. It's a nationwide problem. But like I tell people, if we don't apply for these law enforcement agencies, who's going to be policing our community?
That's right.
Who's it going to be?
Yeah, there you go.
We have to have it.
Hey, thank you guys. Appreciate you. Appreciate all of our viewers for tuning in. And this is something we're going to be back at you monthly, trying to bring difficult conversations and have subject matter experts and people talk. We got to talk about things that we want, and that's the only way we can get there. And so I really appreciate you guys. I know that the debate is on tonight, so I appreciate you guys hanging in. But you know what? I told somebody, well, they said, dang, the debate is on. But you know what? We're going to see that debate repeatedly for the next, all this weekend. That's all we're going to see. So I appreciate you guys. Stay safe. Do the things to stay safe. Wear your mask, social distancing. Go get tested. Get your flu shot. This thing is real. And if you have you have preconditions, it's even worse in terms of if you get that virus. So please take the time to protect yourself. Thank you. God bless you.
Community activists that grew up in North Omaha, it's clear that our community must step up and protect our future. Since my childhood, I've seen a lack of investment in North Omaha. which has resulted in small businesses being forced to shut down, prison overcrowding, low graduation rates, and poor access to health care. I am Terrell McKinney, and this is why I'm running for state legislature in District 11. All power to the people.
Congratulations to all the activists in Omaha. You have the community's attention, and we recognize your hard work. I'm Candid Villard with the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. We're a nonpartisan political organization that's focused on voting rights for all Americans. We work to make sure voters are informed about the candidates and the issues. You can find more information that you need on the candidates by visiting vote411.org. October 16th is the last day to register to vote online, and October 23rd is the last day to register in person. There are lots of ways to vote safely. You can request to vote by mail ballot until October 23rd, but your ballot must be to the election office by 6 p.m. on November 3rd. If you're worried about it not getting there on time, please use a drop box. You can also mask up and vote in person at the Douglas County Election Office until November 2nd or in person on Election Day, November 3rd. We want to work with you once this election is over to keep the pressure on. Consider joining the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, where everyone is welcomed. To join, please visit lwvgo.org/join. In this election, every vote will count, and your vote can make a difference. Join us in making this democracy work. Vote, educate, and advocate. Thank you.
By now you've heard it's a good idea to wear a face covering in public.
Please do not take it personally.
Your mask protects me, my mask protects you.
But here's the key. Make sure it covers your mouth and nose.
Like this.
It's easy, Douglas County, so please wear a mask